stepped out. I'm looking up at this thing, and then I'm in this extremely brilliant white light, and it's the only thing I can see. It didn't hurt. Like, you know, when you see stuff, lights flash in your eyes, and you get that intensity, and you want to block or squint, or you can't look at it. I didn't feel anything like that, but it was so brilliant, and it didn't seem like I was there very long.
My name's Debbie Jordan Cobble, and probably better known as Kathy Davis from Bud Hopkins' book Intruders, The Incredible Visitations at Copley Woods. And this is my story, and it's a long one. It's hard for me to think about where I need to start. And I could say that I've had a really normal life, and in a lot of ways that's true, especially as a kid, you know. But I don't particularly know for sure whether or not I was a normal kid. My first memories when I was really young are of hanging upside down on my swing set at night in my backyard while my mom burnt the trash in the trash barrel, and looking at all the stars in the sky and thinking of all the things that could happen to a kid or anybody living here on this planet. And a part of me would always say that's not all there is. That can't be all there is. I know there's more. And then I would start to feel lonely and homesick for a place I'd never been, and miss people that I'd never met. And that always stayed with me from a very, very young age. That was one of my very first rememberings of being a child. Always feeling a little different. I had an event that happened to me when I was 6 that I shared with my older sister. I have a sister that's 11, almost 12 years older than me. And she herself had a UFO sighting in 1965, which she spoke about often and adamantly. And as a child, she was only probably, well, in 1965, I was 6. And when I heard her speak about it, you know, I didn't question her. I just assumed everybody saw things like that. I worshiped the ground that she walked on. I wanted to be just like her. As a matter of fact, her name is Kathy. And when Bud was writing Intruders, he told all of us to pick a pseudonym name and pick a name of somebody that we admired. And I picked my sister, which was dumb at the time, but it flew. So, but anyway, that event, I was 6 or 7. She had not too long ago gotten her driver's license and took us up to Detroit to visit a friend. And her friend had a little sister who was my friend that I used to play with when they'd come to visit in our neighborhood. And during that visit, I got lost, and I was gone the whole day. Had a weird experience with a little boy with big brown eyes who wanted me to come into his house and play with his toys. But something happened, and I got scared, and I tried to run away. And as I got shoved out the door of the house, there was my sister standing there. And, you know, years later, we talked about it with Bud, and the woman, he actually called the woman's house that where we were at that night many years before, because Kathy had her phone number, and she confirmed that I'd been gone all day. The police had been called, and that my sister had gone out on her own and brought me back. So that was my earliest memory of something weird happening. Then I had a strange event happen when I was 16 with some friends out in the country in the middle of nowhere, driving around in a car. And years later, it turned out when Bud interviewed one of the girls that was in the car, she actually remembered more of the event than I even did consciously. And it was probably that was in the fall of my 17th year. And then in January, right before I turned 18, I found out I was pregnant with my then boyfriend and fiance. We were supposed to get married in June, and we moved the wedding up to April so that I wouldn't be hugely pregnant. This was a different time, and things like that weren't looked on the same way they are now. And then something happened in March while babysitting for my older sister's kids. And I woke up that morning after a strange evening of falling asleep on the couch with Bob Newhart on the TV, waking up in my niece's bedroom and realizing I was something wrong with my baby. Eventually, my mom took me back to the doctor, and I found out I wasn't pregnant anymore. And I was told that they see this sometimes, and that my doctor's best advice to me was to forget that it ever happened. I would have other kids someday. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm never going to forget this, buddy. But we didn't talk about it anymore after that. And my fiance and I eventually, we still got married in April because we were going to get married anyway. And then I had another experience shortly after we were married. We were married in April, and this experience happened probably at the end of August. It was really hot. We lived in an attic apartment in Indianapolis, and I was awakened by these two gray guys, I call them guys, in my room at the foot of my bed. One was holding a black box. When I first saw them, I freaked out and I was panicky, and I remember thinking, oh my God, don't touch me. Just please don't come any closer. And as soon as I felt that terror, I suddenly didn't. It went away. I remember asking him what that box was and if I could have it. I could see there was a red light either on top of it or coming out from inside of it, from a hole on top. And it kind of floated across my lap from his hands to my lap. And, I asked him if I could keep it, and he said no. But when you see it again, you'll know what it's for and how to use it. And I think back on that time now, and I think I was either just pregnant with my son then or got pregnant with him right after this. But he took the box back, and they just kind of dissolved away right there in my room. And I immediately tried to wake up my husband and could not get him awake. So I just slid back down the bed and went to sleep. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's what I did. And I don't know why, but that's what I did. The next morning when I woke up, I told him, oh my God, I tried to wake you up. You aren't going to believe what was in our room last night, what happened. And he just looked at me like, oh, dude, what did you eat for dinner last night? Because don't eat it again. And I told him to bugger off, and I called my mom, and I told her what happened, and I was really adamant about it. It wasn't a dream. I remembered I was wide awake. And my mom was very supportive always, and she just listened and, I guess filed it away in her head somewhere, but she never judged or tried to tell me I was crazy, which I'm thankful for now. And then, like I said, shortly after that, I got pregnant with my son. and the pregnancy was horrible. And when he was still not due for another 6 weeks, I had eclampsia that quickly went to, I was going into a coma, my organs were failing. They took him by cesarean 6 weeks early, and I died on the table. Actually, I was resuscitated twice, but I remembered one of my times. I remember one of the 2 times that I died, and I had a near-death experience that was bizarre and not like you would typically hear. I didn't see Jesus or angels or dead family members or the light. I could feel them cut me open, and I later just learned years later that actually is a thing where they, especially during C-sections, they don't give you quite enough to knock your consciousness out, but they get you to hold still. So I could feel them cut me open, but I couldn't let anybody know. I was desperately trying to tell someone I could feel it, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. Couldn't talk, move, or anything. And all of a sudden, I felt myself disconnect from my body, and it was like almost with an audible whoop sound. I just felt unplugged all of a sudden. And I felt me. I could feel me, but I couldn't see me. And I could feel this box all around me, this blackness, but I could feel it stopping me. And I could hear the sound. It was like crazy sound happening all around me. Lots of yelling and clanking and voices and things. And then it started to go farther and farther away, but I'm still stuck in this box. And I start pounding on this box with my fists. And I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, "Let me out. I'm not dead." But no one could hear me. And the voices went farther and farther away until they stopped, and it was silent. And then I heard this woman say from everywhere around me, "You can't go yet. You have a son and he needs his mommy." And I was like, "Oh, I have a son. I had a life." And it was in that moment I realized I had completely forgotten the entire life I was trying to leave, including the baby that I so desperately wanted. And as soon as I heard that voice and remembered that life, I locked right back in to that box. And I could hear the sounds of everybody yelling and screaming, and they were getting louder and louder and louder. And then I was suddenly able to move. I remembered I could shake my legs, and I felt a strap go down around my legs. And I knew I was alive. And I knew they knew I was alive. And the strangest part about that whole thing was he was born 6 weeks early, and they know that because he didn't have any fingernails or toenails yet. They were just little dents. He had long, silky white hair all over him that rubbed off after a few days. His little ears were curled up like little Spock ears. And the nurses called him the Peanut. But that kid weighed 5 pounds and was 21 inches long. And this was 46 years ago, almost 46 years ago. And he and I both went home together 7 days later. His lungs were completely formed. And my body completely healed. And the 2 heart attacks I had, no damage. The liver and the kidneys that failed woke up. But this near-death experience was very traumatic for me. I mean, and on the one hand, it changed how I looked about life and death, but then it gave me a whole new anxiety about what happens when I die if I can't get out. But anyway, and somehow I feel it's all connected to this whole thing because it added a new wire harness up here in my consciousness that I didn't have before. That I think enhanced what was already there that was different. And it was, I think my oldest boy was 4 by the time we had moved back home with my mom and dad. And in 1983, he was 4 because he was born in 79. And in 1983, on June 30th, is when the event happened that left the mark in the yard and changed my life again forever. I was a single mom, and had just moved back home not too terribly long before that with my parents, because my husband and I were getting a divorce, and we gotten divorced. And I was actually getting ready to go cut out some patterns for a friend of mine who was a seamstress who happened to live just the street over behind my mom and dad's house. And as I stood at the kitchen window washing my hands and just kind of looking out, willy-nilly, a light caught my eye. My mom and dad had a swimming pool at the back of their house. We called it the cement pond. It was one of those big Esther Williams pools, all underground. And it had a really nice pump house right next to it that was made with the same sandstone that the tri-level that we lived in was made of. And then behind that, even further, was a big workshop that my dad had. And he had Indian motorcycles out there that he was restoring. He had 2 Alpine Sunbeam British race cars he was restoring. He built radio-controlled airplanes. He had an HO train set out there at one time. My dad was an interesting fella, and all this was self-taught. He was also an electrician at a local factory, automotive factory, for 35 years, and he had his own electrical contracting company, and he was the youngest ham radio operator in the state of Indiana for a long time that had a Class A license. So anyway, but I noticed this light in the pump house that shouldn't be there. I thought, that's weird. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at the time, but later I realized, I think it stood out to me because it should have been an incandescent bulb, but it looked bright for some reason. Then I mentioned to my mom, hey, there's a weird light out in the pump house. Do you want me to go out there and check it out? She's like, no, don't worry about it. Your dad will get it when he gets home. Because Dad worked second shift at the local plant, and he'd be home about 11:15, 11:30. I said, if you're sure, okay. So I finished up, and 5 minutes later, I was in my car at the front of the house. But something still bugged me about it. So I decided to go down the split drive. There was the drive split in the front, one down in front of the garage where I was, but another one went down the side of the house back to the workshop, and there was a turnaround back there behind the pool. And I thought, you know what? I think I'm just going to go back there, do a little look-see in the turnaround just to make sure that everything is copacetic with the workshop. I'm not thinking about aliens at the time, not even remotely. I'm thinking about burglars and all that money back there, and leaving my mom with my 2 kids alone. I looked, didn't see anything. She didn't seem to be concerned about the light, so I didn't stop for that. And I just went on to my friend's house. 2 minutes, got there and called Mom and said, hey, I checked everything out and I didn't see anything, but I did notice that the pedestrian door to the garage was open, the garage that's attached to the house. She said, don't worry about it. Your dad will get that when he gets home too. And I said, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, I'm sure. Because I knew my dog had been in the garage, and I knew she was out if that door was open because it was her time. She was in season. So I hung the phone up, and just moments later it rang again, and it was Mom. And she says to me, I need you to come home right now. And I said, why? What's wrong? And my friend's husband was overhearing this whole conversation. He could hear that I was, disturbed. And he hollers over my shoulder, tell her to call the sheriff. That's what we pay him for. And she heard him, and she said, I don't want anybody here but you. And I'm like, okay. I told my friends, well, I'm going to go check it out. I'll be back. And they were like, okay, that's cool. So I went back home. And I pulled up on that side drive again, but instead of going all the way back, I stopped alongside the house and got out, and I went into what we call the Florida room. That is where Mom was standing, and there was a trash compactor out there, and there was a shotgun next to it, and I picked up that shotgun. And my mom says, that's not loaded, right? And I'm like, yeah, I know it's not loaded. I'm the reason it's not loaded. But they don't. Whoever might be out there, I'm thinking to myself, I can get close enough to whack somebody in the head with this before they figure out it's not loaded. And I always tell everybody, the fact that I actually went out there and did that, and it's now dark, and the fact that I went out there and actually did that is way not like me, way out of my character. So I don't know what overcame me, what braveness overcame me that night. I would do it now in a heartbeat, but not then. But I went out there, I looked at the pump house, didn't see anything. I went back by the workshop again just to make sure the windows and doors were all good. And I found my dog under Dad's ladder truck, but she would not come out. And so I said, well, fine, you can stay there all night. I went back across the yard to the pedestrian door, and I walked into the garage. And as I am looking around there in the garage, all of a sudden I felt like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. I felt terrified, panic-stricken. I felt like I was on fire, and I turned to run through the open doorway, and when I hit the doorway, something hit me. It was like the electric fist right in what they call, I guess, your solar plexus area, your chest, stomach area. And the light was so white and intense and bright that I couldn't see anything else but that light. And I know I had to have my eyes closed, but it was just everywhere. It just went right through me. I could feel this vibrating. I started shaking, but then it started to feel like a vibrating real fast. I could feel it spread through my arms and my chest, down my legs, around my head. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm dead. I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm dead. And I have absolutely no idea how long I was in that state. I have no idea. And people have laughed at me because I've said, oh, time stopped. Well, I don't know what time did, but I have no idea how long I was there. When the shaking and the vibrating finally did stop and the light suddenly waned, the intensity just dropped off really quick, I couldn't move. And I could barely see anything because my eyes were just covered with my vision was just splotched up with this white splotchiness. But I was not in the doorway anymore. I was now maybe 10, 15 feet out onto the concrete patio in front of the door. And I have absolutely no idea how I got there. And I still couldn't move, but I could move my eyes, and I was looking around in the yard because I was seeing movement. And as I got my eyes a little adjusted and focused, I could see what I thought were kids in my mom's yard. And I thought to myself, what the hell are these kids doing in my mom's backyard? Something had pulled down behind my shoulder and had said to me it was unfortunate that I felt pain. And then I felt this burning sensation in my right ear. And then I saw these kids and I thought, oh, what the hell? And then it made me think of my own kids. And I thought, oh God, my kids are in that, are my kids. And again, the voice that came from everywhere that I couldn't see anybody said, your children are okay. And suddenly I wasn't afraid anymore. That's when I noticed this ball of light about the size of a basketball. It was white, but it was not hard to look at like that other light was crazy. And it was about as high up off the ground as I am tall. I'm 5'2". And it went down really slow, and then it came back up really slow. And I thought, why is it's looking at me? Why are you looking at me? And that was when I saw the thing next to it. Like, it was this egg-shaped, we call it a craft, but honestly, it was so small. It wasn't much bigger than the pump house with a swimming pool. I can't even imagine that 6 of these little kids that I had seen in the yard could get in there and go anywhere. That doesn't make sense. So I have no idea what it was. I saw those kids. They all came from different parts of the yard, and they all kind of lined up out by the driveway where the pool gate starts, and then they just slid across the yard in front of me. but they didn't come at me. And as I'm watching them, then my eye sees that thing. And when I see that thing, I'm like, oh, hell no. I didn't want to look at it. I did not want to look at it, but I needed to know where it was in relationship to me at all times. And I needed to know if it was moving closer to me. Not that I could do anything about it, but I just, it's one of the things like you don't want to see it, but you can't not see it. And I'm at that point also, I don't even know where those little kids went. I don't remember seeing them go in the thing. I have no idea where they went. I have no idea, because everything disappeared when I saw that thing. And then I'm just standing there, and there's that thing, and it's almost wobbling. So I'm really not even sure it's all the way on the ground at one point, because it was a little bit of a wobble. It had these real skinny legs coming out the middle of it, because it was like an egg shape sitting on its big bottom with the pointy side up. And it had like a couple of, I don't know if they're actually windows or lights on the top, and then like a small square thing under the bottom. And if you want to see what it looked like, go watch when the Dragon, SpaceX Dragon, picked up those two astronauts, when they pulled the Dragon capsule up onto the deck, and that camera shoots down in there, and you see that it looked like that. But anyway, and I drew pictures of it. There's tons of pictures out there. But so this thing is out in the yard, and I'm looking at it, and I don't know what's happening. I don't know what just happened. And then I hear my name. But this voice was different. This wasn't the same voice I'd heard the other two times. And as soon as I heard my name, I moved. I could move. And I turned towards it, and I started to walk across the patio, up the steps, and there's my mom standing there with her head hanging out the kitchen door. She's like, is everything okay? And I said, yeah, everything's cool. But all of a sudden, I don't want to sew anymore, and I'm feeling really weird. I don't know what just happened to me, and I need to get wet. I felt like I wanted to take a shower or get wet, and then I got in my head, oh, maybe I can get Deanna to come back over and go swimming. I don't want to sew. So I talked to my friend, and I said, hey, you want to come over and swim? She says, okay, yeah. So she brought her teenager daughter with her, and they arrived. We walked across the backyard to the pool, and her daughter steps on something in the yard, and we don't know what it was. She complained, it stung. Her foot was tingling, and her foot went numb, and her leg was going up her leg. And we got to the pool, and we looked all over her foot for a stinger or something, like we thought maybe she'd stepped on a bee or a thistle or something, but we didn't see anything. And so her mom's like, well, put your feet in the cool water. It's cool water. It's chlorinated. It'll feel better. So we all got in the pool for probably 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes. And all of us started getting nauseated. And I was getting a headache. And honestly, I had a little bit of a headache, and it was getting worse. And I noticed that my eyes were I was starting to see halos around all the lights outside, and it was making my head hurt. And so I think, this was over 40 years ago. I do believe my friend made some comment about maybe we could go to White Castle and get something to eat, and we'll feel better. A couple chubby girls. And if you know anything about White Castles, that's ridiculous. So, they went home, and I went to bed. And when I woke up the next morning, my eyes were so swollen that I couldn't open them to see, because it felt like I had chunks of glass in my eye, and my face was swollen. My mother took me to the emergency room, and I don't know why, because I know now that, ophthalmologists typically don't hang around emergency rooms, but there was an ophthalmologist in this emergency room that morning. And of course, as soon as an eye mess like mine came in, they sent him to look at me, and he asked my mom and me if we would mind if we went across the street to his office, because he had more equipment there and he could have a better exam for me. And so we're like, sure. So we went across the street to his office, and he took a look at me, and the first thing he says is, have you looked into the arc of a welder's torch? Have you been somewhere where there was an eclipse? Have you looked into the sun? And I'm thinking to myself at this point, having forgotten about what all happened the night before with the light and the egg-shaped thing and the little kids. And I'm thinking, what the hell? Why are you asking me this dumb stuff? No. I thought, do I really look that dumb? But I just wanted him to give me some medicine. I know there was drops and this gooey cream in a tube, and it took several weeks for my eyes to get better. But from that point on, I never wore glasses before. But after my eyes healed, I was so farsighted I had to get glasses. And I'll just throw this in here before I forget it. At the age of 30s, in my mid 30s, I got diagnosed with cataracts and macular degeneration. And by the time I had almost hit 50, I had to have both lenses replaced. I've had to be dilated every 6 months since I was in my mid 30s, and I'm 66 now. So they're watching it. But, and my eyes for 2 years after that, they would just like water for no reason and burn all of a sudden, and then they'd be all right. And I noticed one eye was more green than blue. And I will forever and ever blame all of my eye problems on that night, even though I have absolutely no proof. But I'm just throwing that out there. But anyway, I started feeling weird the next morning. I started not being able to sleep for days. I would sit in between my kids' bed. They had twin beds up in their room at mom's, and I would sit between the twin beds at night while everyone slept, and I felt like I was just waiting for I don't know what. And I couldn't go to the bathroom in that upstairs bathroom with the window there. And I couldn't figure out why I had this aversion to the window. I kept feeling like someone was going to pull me out the window. Later, I realized that window would overlook the mark in the yard. We saw the mark in the yard a couple days later. The whole family had come over for 4th of July weekend holiday because we had the pool and the big lot in the back for fireworks. And all the kids ran out the back kitchen door to the pool, and my oldest nephew came back in and said, "Grandma, what's wrong with your yard?" It's weird because neither me or Mom had even looked out the back since that night. And if Dad saw anything, he either didn't notice it or just didn't say anything. But my mom looked at my nephew and said, "I don't know what you're talking about." So he said, "Well, come on, come and look." So all the adults inside went out with all the kids. And there it was, this mark in the yard. This bizarre mark in the yard. It was like an 8-foot circle. And it was off the patio. If you were standing in the garage door, the pedestrian door of the garage, and you looked, it'd almost be directly in front of you, just a little bit to your left. And there was a long street coming off of it, and it went all the way across the backyard up to where the drive met the gate to the swimming pool. And it ended in this perfect little arc, and that was 2 feet wide, 49 feet long, 2 feet wide, and it was attached to this 8-foot circle. And on one side of this 8-foot circle, a little bit of the dirt was shoved up, and there was a big crack in it. And my mom, and the grass looked kind of this beigeish gray color, and it just all laid over, and the dirt under it was rock hard. My mom kind of nervous giggle and says, "Oh, that's where our UFO landed." And the kids were giggling, and I looked at her, and my first reaction was, "What? Why would you say that?" Because I did not think it was funny. And I looked at her like, "What?" And then I looked down at this mark in the yard, and then it was like somebody just slapped me awake. I remembered the light bam, I remembered the kids. I remembered that thing. All of that started coming back. And when I looked at the mark in the yard again, I saw, like, in the space between my eyes and the mark, like superimposed over this mark in the yard, these two big black eyes that just looked like shimmering blackness that you could just fall in. And exactly that moment, I had a nervous breakdown. I went from bad to worse after that, because I started to remember not just that night, but I started thinking about things that had happened when I was younger. And I started having weird feelings and thoughts, like, for this whole year afterwards, I'll just say, I collected seeds and stones, and I took things apart and put them back together to see how they worked. And I would, for probably 6 or 8 months after this June 30th incident, probably for the year after that at least, I would be awakened in the middle of the night with ideas and thoughts like light can cure, heal, and nutrition and food and sound vibrations. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And I would just write it down, because if I didn't, it wouldn't leave me alone. I'd be driving. I remember one time I was driving down the street. I was driving down Brookville Road, and I suddenly got this image in my head, and I could not focus on the driving. I had to literally pull over, get my notebook that I now carried with me, and draw this image that I saw in my head that was like flying out of my eyes. And then as soon as I did that, I was fine. It went away. As soon as I could get it out of my head and put it somewhere where it wouldn't get lost or forgotten, and then it would leave me alone and I could go on. And this went on for like a year or so or more. And I had picked up a book called Missing Time in the library a few months prior to what happened in June. And I was not able to read the whole book. The book gave me like panic attacks, which were insane, as I really wasn't fully putting two and two together. Thought the subject was interesting. Thought maybe my sister might have had an experience like that. Still wasn't sure about myself. I was in debunker mode at that point. I was trying to find prosaic explanations for all these things I was remembering and things I'd seen. I was trying to, I called the agricultural state for the state of Indiana, talking to them about the mark in the yard. At the end of the day, I could find a lot of people who could tell me what things weren't, but I couldn't find anybody who could tell me what they were. The more questions I asked, the more questions I had, basically. And so one of the things I remembered when I out there that day was that book. And I knew that even though I hadn't read the whole book, I knew in the back that there was an address where you could write to the guy who'd written the book. And something in me said, he can help me. This guy can help, because I was having a nervous breakdown. I couldn't cope. I couldn't deal with the things I was thinking. That even in an open-minded family like I had, I just wanted to be normal. I just wanted a normal life. I wanted my kids to have a normal life. This wasn't normal. I thought I was crazy. So I wrote this guy. I went back to the library, got the address, and I wrote to Bud Hopkins. I started the letter out with my sister's experience. And then at the very end, I'm like, oh, by the way, this happened a few weeks ago, or, a couple weeks or two ago. And I took a whole bunch of pictures of the mark in the yard. And Mom eventually mailed the letter. It's weird. She told me that it took her a week to remember why she'd called me to come home that night. One day she's at the kitchen doing something at the sink, and she's like, oh, you know what? I just remember why I called you to come home that other night. I'm like, okay, why? And she's like, I was standing here And I was just looking out the window and I looking at the bird feeder and I saw this light, like basketball size ball of light around the bird feeder. And she said, I thought maybe your dad had come home early. I thought it was a headlight from the truck. But then there was no vehicle there. And she said, I thought maybe there was a flashlight. Somebody was lurking around with a flashlight shining it on there. And she said, I just stared at it and I couldn't figure out where this light was coming from. She said it got smaller and smaller and smaller. And then poof, when it disappeared, I got it in my head that you needed to come home right now. And I'm like, well, it's a good thing you didn't tell me that then, because I don't know whether I would have come home or not. That's a little creepy, mother. But she did tell me that she held on to that letter for a week or two, and she, in her own mind, I didn't know what she remembered of that night. And of course, she was seeing me coming unglued, and I was talking to her about the things that I was remembering and what was going on. And she said to Bud, she said, I actually thought to myself there, do I really want to open up this Pandora's box? Do I really want to do this? And she said, I was standing at the mailbox one day with my bills in my hand, getting ready to shove them in. And she said, something in my head said, mail Debbie's letter now. Mail that letter. So I got it out of my purse and I stuck it in the mailbox. And then Bud called when he got it after he read it. Wasn't terribly long after that. And he talked to my mom. He talked to me. He talked to my sister. And, that 2-year investigation began. You have to remember this was 40 some years ago. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have the email. We didn't even have cell phones. All we had was letters and strategically placed long distance calls that were very expensive. So we'd wait till weekends and after, 6 p.m. during the week. And it was Bud that would always call me. Very rarely did I call him because I couldn't afford it. So I communicated a lot with him in letters. And, that fall, the fall of that first year, my dog had gotten so sick, we ended up having to put her to sleep. She'd been out there that night with whatever that was. And all the hair on her back started falling off. And at first we thought she had mange until it started falling off in places that she couldn't even rub. And then she developed these big black oozy things on her back. And then we noticed that her eyes were fogged over and we'd find teeth in her dog food bowl. And she just went down very quickly. And when we took her to the vet just said, there's nothing I can do for her. And she had to be put down. And then when the first snow came that year, and all the snows for that whole year, every time it snowed, the snow melted off of the mark in that yard. And, within half an hour of a snowfall, you'd look out the window and there it was, biggest day, the circle and the streak, no snow on it. I sold my washer and dryer for my first trip to New York to see Bud after we had communicated and he agreed to help me. And I'm like, dude, that's how desperate I was. I never wrote anybody in my life who had ever written a book, never felt inclined to whatsoever. And for some reason, I just felt like this guy could help me. Even though this guy was just really an artist. But first something was pushing me at him, was pushing me to him. And so I written him and decided to come to New York. I had no money, so I had a washer and dryer, stackable washer and dryer in storage that I sold. It was just enough money for a round trip ticket to bus ticket to New York. 17-hour bus trip. Halfway there, I have this major panic attack, and I think to myself, what in the hell are you doing? You are a mother. You're all your kids have. Have you lost your mind? You're going to see some man in New York City, which that freaked me out because I'd never been anywhere by myself in my life, and I had this phobia of getting lost. I carried a compass in my purse until the advent of cell phones and navigation system because I was so terrified of being lost. And I think it stems from that event when I was a kid. But so I'm halfway to New York, I'm freaking out. I'm thinking, this guy could be an axe murderer. You're going to see a guy you don't know in New York City, that big city, you could get lost. This guy could be insane, psycho. And he wrote a book about aliens, for Christ's sake. What is wrong with you? And I almost got off the bus, and something stopped me because I was about to get off that bus and go right back home. But I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. I got off the bus in New York, and there he stood, coffee in one hand, bag of muffins in the other, big smile on his face. And I thought, okay, well, he looks nice enough. He doesn't look like an axe murderer. So, but, in retrospect now, I think he might have been just making sure I was okay, because instead of taking me to his studio, the first place he took me was to a psychiatrist's office. It's when I met Dr. Aphrodite Clamar for the first time. And I don't blame him. I'm mad at him for that. It makes sense. She and I had a nice talk, and she calmed me down. It was a long 17-hour trip. I was exhausted. I was full of anxiety. She put me under a light hypnotic trance just so I could feel what it was like, because I'd never been hypnotized before. And the only experience I'd ever seen with it was, the guys on like the Merv Griffin show where they make people like squawk like chickens. And I didn't want somebody doing that to me. And my older sister, had a bad experience with hypnotherapy when she had tried to be hypnotized to lose weight, that landed her in the emergency room, unable to speak or see for several days, which was bizarre. And of course, that was in the back of my mind. So, but she helped me get over that. And then, the investigation began. Over the course of 2 years, Bud came to our house. He made several trips to Indiana and interviewed all the family, saw the mark in the yard. We got soil samples that he took and had tested. He knocked on the neighbors' doors, and much to my mom's chagrin, she's like, oh my God, the neighbors are going to think we're crazy. As it turns out, not so much, because 2 of the neighbors actually saw something happen that night, or reported something. The one directly to the north of us, that our houses were separated by just a little bit of wooded area, she told him that she had seen a bright flash from the backyard, and her whole house shook. Her television set turned red, and her husband told Bud that when he got home that night, she was hiding behind a couch, and she was having an anxiety attack because she thought someone was coming to get her. And then the gal across the street from us was a night shift nurse. She just so happened to be working in the same hospital that Mom took me to at the emergency room. She hadn't gotten up yet, but she had been awakened by what she thought sounded like a jet about to crash into her house. And her power went out, and her clock stopped in the front part of the house. And then I'll say 20 years after Intruders was published, Bud got a letter from a gal who lived directly behind Mom and Dad on the next street. And that house was separated by a small wooded area between us and them. We wouldn't see them in the summer when the trees were full bloomed. But in the letter she wrote to Bud, she said that around that same time that this happened, but she couldn't pinpoint the exact date, but around the same time frame, her teenage boys at the time used to love to sleep out in the garage with all their friends. And the garage opened and faced our house through the woods. And she said one night the kids came tearing in there, absolutely terrified. And they told her that they saw what they said were hundreds of basketball-sized balls of white light drifting through the woods between our house and their house. And it scared those boys so bad that they never slept in the garage again, ever, after that night. And this woman somehow came across the Intruders book and read this story, and then felt compelled to write him. This was 20-some years later, even. There was one other incident that happened at Mom's house that I remember. That was April of '84. I had for some reason, at 11 o'clock at night, thought I needed to go get some fingernail polish remover because I was giving myself a manicure. So I went to the local 7-Eleven, and then when I was coming home, I saw this weird light coming from the west. And it was doing strange things. And all of a sudden, it did something that I knew it wasn't a plane. And I put the hammer down on the gas, and I peeled into the driveway. And I got out of the car, and I ran up in the front porch, and I screamed in the door, "Mom, get out here. You've got to see this. You aren't going to believe this." And my mom came out, and here we are both standing on the porch like this, looking up. This thing, we could see the light in the front as the house is surrounded with trees, but there's a big clearing above the house. This thing came to the clearing, and it wasn't much taller than the trees. It was low, and it was so big that it blocked out the whole sky. And it was dark, except for that light in the front, and there was a little red light under where the two wingy things met. But then when it got right over us, all of the lights came on. And because I could hear it. And they were like white fluorescent lights that just lit up the whole bottom side. And like bars of lights and little dots of lights. And then that red light up in the middle. I could actually see a dark square thing off the back. Mom couldn't see that part. She just saw the wings part. It was like a giant flying wings, like a boomerang shape, with the round thing in the middle with the red light. Anyway, it was with exception of a very low hum, it was almost silent, and it just glided right over the house. Mom is standing there going, "Oh my God, that's so beautiful." And I am standing there going, "Oh hell no, not again." And I left my mom standing on the front porch, and I ran through the house to the back porch and out the back porch to see it clearing the house. And it went over by 465, and instead of making a big banking turn like a big plane would, it just went whoop, just turned right on its axis, and it headed back the way it came, except it was a little more north. And of course, it was right over 465 and US and Shaglin Avenue in Indianapolis. Indianapolis is not a small town. There's a million people there. We live 10 minutes from downtown Indy where this happened. You know, people don't know where this is, but it was 10, 15 minutes from downtown Indianapolis. That's a big city. So Mom and I are like, "Oh my God, there are going to be a million people seeing this thing." We had the radio on. We listened to the news on the TV. Mom got the newspaper the next morning. Nothing. And we called Bud, and Bud, we got the phone number for the CUFOS, the UFO Reporting Center in Chicago, because MUFON already said they didn't want nothing to do with us. Bud tried to contact MUFON early on, and they didn't want anything to do with it as soon as they heard me say I saw kids in the yard. They were done with me. So we called the UFO Reporting Center's like a 24-hour hotline number, and my mom called the phone number, and Dr. Heineck, I believe, answered the phone. I think it might have been going right to his house. I don't know. I remember him telling Mom and I to sit down separately and draw pictures of what we'd seen. So we did, and sent them to him, and we had one more conversation with him. Mom was the last one to talk to him. But that was phenomenal, unbelievable. And it was, again, Mom and I were together. And we thought, how come 100,000 other people didn't see this? This is insane. And Dr. Heineck told my mom he had begun to wonder if maybe not everyone could see these or wasn't meant to see these. So that was the first time I got that thought in my head. Bud had me go to New York, and I went to a hospital there, and I had an EEG where they put the wires on my head. I had a CAT scan of my brain. They wanted to rule out epilepsy or brain tumors or anything like that. I had 6 hours of psychological testing, some written and some verbal. And I remember telling the guy, "Look, I don't, it's okay if you tell me I'm crazy because they make pills for that and I would be more than happy to take them. I don't have a problem with that. Yeah. At the end of the day, I didn't, they said I didn't have schizophrenia. I didn't have delusions. I wasn't, hyper imaginative or whatever that word was. Um, the only things that stood out was that they diagnosed me with PTSD. And this was back in the 80s. I didn't know what that meant. I never heard of that before. Post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety, which I did know because I had struggled with anxiety since I was a teenager. And that was above average intelligence. So, and then in Indianapolis, he arranged for me to have something called a voice stress test. And the guy that he got to do it was blind in that he had no idea who I was, who Bud was, what the questions were going to be, or anything. And at the end of the day, after that test was over with, and he reported back to Bud, Bud reported to me, Bud talked to me, and he said, well, the man said that he can't guarantee that I saw a UFO in my mom's backyard or I saw aliens, but he can guarantee that I believe I did. And Bud said, well, that's all I need to know. So anyway, this whole investigation with him went on for 2 years at least. And then he finally came to us. When he came out to the house, he came to us and he says, hey, I'd like to write a book about your case because I think it's important. There's a lot of components to it that a lot of other cases don't have. You've got the traces, you've got the physical damage, you've got your dog's physical damage, you've got the physical damage to the plant life in the yard. There were other things like my dad's ham radio antenna that was out there, the coax cable that ran into the house that was over by that area, all the metal wiring inside of the coax cable melted together, but the outside part stayed okay, which is weird. And the transformer that was over the pump house, the swimming pool, exploded a few weeks after that. And just a lot of, he had the soil sample testing done. And we had the neighbors, we had the independent witnesses, the neighbors. My mom was there that night. He interviewed the people that I had been with, my friend and her husband that I was going to sew with. They had no recollection of how long I'd been gone. It was almost as if they'd been shut off as well. Because she almost got kind of upset because she didn't realize I'd been gone for almost an hour and a half when I called her back to go swimming. Because she goes, no, she wasn't gone that long. If she'd have been gone that long, I would have been worried because we knew she was going, but that's how long I was gone. And so something even affected them the next street over. So anyway, he's like, I really think this is an important case and I want to tell the world about it. And at this point, since he'd been coming to us to investigate us, and do his investigation and research and everything, even though it hadn't been made public, like books and things like that, word got around somehow because we had weirdos coming to the house wanting to, they'd pull up in the side drive that I went down and they'd jump out, take pictures of the back of the house and the back of the circle, and then they'd get in their car and drive away. One time our neighbor called us and she's like, we weren't at home. And she said, were you expecting somebody? And Mom was like, no. Well, there was a dude in a suit with a big suitcase out there messing around with the backyard and that mark. And she didn't know if we had been expecting someone, and that they had shown up and we weren't there. We had no idea who that was. Well, Dad approached a bunch of guys in a van that were hanging on the phone line pole out in front of our house. And Dad said, what the hell are you doing? And they told him, go away. Mind your own business. Don't worry about it. Then we had an issue with black helicopters chasing family members all over the place for like a year. And just all kinds of weird stuff was happening, And then on top of that, paranormal stuff started ramping up in Mom's house. And stuff started ramping up with me. I started having these abilities I didn't really know I had before. When I was 16 once, cleaning some handles on a kitchen cabinet, I ended up somehow twisting up a bunch of brass handles, and I don't know how I did it. My sister was mad at me because I did it, and I had to help her buy Mom new brass handles for the kitchen cabinets, but I don't know how I did it. I was just had my hands in the bucket scrubbing them. We couldn't bend them back. And just, I would have like prophetic dreams and lucid dreams. It was all beginning. It was all starting. This change in me was starting to happen. It started June 30, 83. And I often say, Debbie died that night, but this new Debbie was born. And it was a painful birth, as all births are. But it was worth it, I guess. I mean, people ask me today if I could make it all go away, if I could just have a completely normal life with none of this stuff in it, all the way back from the very beginning. Would I? And while I will never discount my fear and my terror in the beginning and the pain, the physical pain and trouble I've had, I wouldn't change a thing, because right now, as it stands, I'm awake and I'm aware more than I've ever been in my life. And I would not be that way had I not gone through this. And there's nothing about my life right now that would be even remotely recognizable had I not had these experiences. And the way I look at these experiences now is that I'm a little pebble in a slingshot, and somebody is pulling that sucker way down there. Because let me tell you, I've been through some shit, not just with this stuff, but I mean, I watched my late husband shoot himself with a 12 gauge in front of me. I had a house drop on me in an F3 tornado and lost everything I owned. Actually, I've lost everything I've owned in tornadoes twice. I've gone through things, regular life, as you would say, that just one of those things a lot of people would never come back from. Not only did I come back from them, I came back better than ever from them. Whoever pulled that slingshot back, the farther down I go, when they let go, the higher up I'm able to go. So all these experiences that I've had have created me and made me what I've been able to do so far, and I'm not done. And it also woke something in me where I felt like I was supposed to be here. I mean, my birth is weird. Mom had Kathy and didn't have any more kids for almost 12 years and was told she couldn't have any more kids. 6 months after she moved into the UFO house, which what the neighbors called it, they used to sit on the roof and watch the UFOs fly over. I came along, and then my brother and sister, my little brother and little sister, came right after that. But none of us should be here. We weren't supposed to be. But I've grown and changed and morphed into this person. And my BFF of 55 years, who's been through a lot of this stuff with me, as a matter of fact, she'll say to anybody who will listen now, she said, I wish you could have known her before that night, because it's like two different people. I've watched the change happen. She's the only person alive pretty much that has, except for my siblings. So, and I feel like I'm supposed to be doing something really important. One of the, when I was getting all these messages and in these lucid dreams that I had, one of the messages I got was to not be afraid, because fear would just slow the process for me. And that my first order of business was to overcome my fear and terror. And that was to stop being a victim and start being a survivor, and change my perspective on things. And so I did. And when I did that, it took the power away from everything else and gave it back to me. And the fear went away. And once the fear stopped, I'm game for everything now. I'm to the point now where I go for a walk a couple of years ago with my headphones on, listening to my music and feeling all zen and connected to my, world, some different headspace. And I hear a man come up behind me and he says, "Hey, Deb." I pulled my earbuds off and turned around to say hi to who I thought was a neighbor, and there was no one there. Now when I was 25, that would have scared shit out of me. I would either thought I've lost my mind or whatever. But at this point in my life now, I'm like, okay, I'll play. What do you want? Who's this? And he'll say, hey, and he said, did you know that from where I am, I see you only as a small ball of white light floating around. You're a bright one, but I see you. And he said, you know, those little balls of white light you see, that's us. That's me. But where I live just like you. And I said, okay, are you dead? Because at this point I was started to get into paranormal research and especially EVPs. And so I said, are you dead? And he kind of laughed and he said, no, I'm as alive as you are. And I said, well, are you one of those gray guys, aliens? And he said, no, they're your future. And I said, well, then who are you? That was the end of the conversation. That was it. I looked around and I thought, well, Lord have mercy, I hope my neighbors think I'm talking on my phone. So I kind of waved my phone around a little bit, And then I immediately wrote it all down, which is what I do now. That's how my books get written. I write it all down and then carried on. If I'd have been terrified of that whole scenario and all of that and been scared, none of that would have happened. But so this is my life now, and this is who I am now. And I haven't had any more physical experiences like I was having for probably since I had 92 when I had my hysterectomy. That was the last time I had a physical experience, and I was with 3 other people. But it's gone from physical to metaphysical to spiritual, intellectual, emotional. I've got my high school's transcripts where my IQ was 111. And then I have my acceptance letter to Mensa where I scored 141 on one of the tests and 136 or 135 on the other. There were 2 different tests I took. So that either tells me IQ tests are a bunch of shit or something happened. I started to read books, and I started being really interested in physics and quantum physics and string theory and all kinds of weird stuff like that. And I had this epiphany one day when I captured an EVP 30 years ago, and I heard this voice on my EVP recorder say, are the spirits listening? And I realized, oh my God, somebody's listening to us. We're the spirits somewhere else. And that was like somebody flicked a domino. And it hasn't stopped since. And I'm to the point now where I believe that they've taught me, they started me on some journey here and some learning journey. And I'm still learning every day, by the way. But human beings are like, we're like tube type radios in Adobe digital surround sound world. There's all kinds of stuff going on all around us. There's life right here. But our brains aren't wired to receive that information. We can't perceive them because we can't receive the information. Just like a television antenna can pick up the television signals, and my Wi-Fi signal, my computer can pick up my Wi-Fi, and my phone can, but my brain can't. I don't know that's there. I can't see it. I can't feel it. I can't taste it. But that doesn't mean it isn't there. They're right here. They're right here all around us. And a lot of them know that we're here. And I think there's some of them that are having their lives and they don't know we're here either. A lot of the EVPs that I capture when I go on paranormal investigations, I don't think they're dead people. I don't think these people have ever lived here anywhere, and I don't think they're dead. I don't know what I'm recording, but whatever it is, it's there. So this is what's happened to me since my experiences the physical part has stopped, and now I've just, maybe I have lost my freaking mind. I don't know. I ask myself that a lot. I go to therapy and I asked my therapist, and she said to me the other day when we had this conversation, I said, am I crazy? Because I show her everything and I tell her. She goes, you're like the least craziest person I know. I said, well, thank you. So anyway, it's a long story, and believe it or not, there's a whole lot more I could tell you, and I could talk for hours about all kinds of weird stuff. And thank God I wrote a lot of it down, because I'm 66 years old now, and some of that stuff is getting a little faint, you know. But there's just so much, and I'm like an onion with a million layers. But anyway, that's basically my story. That's me. This is me. And when I tell my story, I'm not trying to make anybody believe anything I say. If you don't want to believe me, that's fine. That's your prerogative. I don't blame you. I have seen things in my life that I probably would have trouble with had I not seen them. But I trust in myself, and I believe my own eyes. So I get it. I don't ask for anything but for everybody or anybody who wants to listen to me with their open mind. And if there's one thing I say, one word or phrase or idea that I put out there that helps you in some way, then I did what I came here to do. And that's all that I could ever hope for. So I appreciate every opportunity I get to tell my story. And I appreciate Steve letting me tell my story, because it's a long one. And sometimes I struggle to keep things organized, because I really just want to get in your head and just let you feel everything all at once, because it's so much easier, but it doesn't work that way. So anyway, that's my story.